Hi guys, welcome to another edition of the Premier Life podcast. Dr. Kaytlynn here today, and we're going to be talking about the nervous system, which if you've been a practice member in our office for a long time, it's something we talk a lot about, and that's because the nervous system is essential for regulating all of the processes in the body. But today we're going to dive a little bit more in depth, particularly with the brain. And the brain is one of those organs that there is so much information we have about it, but there's still loads of information that need to be uncovered because the brain is such a vast organ that is always changing, always adapting. On a day-to-day, we can build new neural connections and new neural pathways. And the vastness and the uncertainty of the brain is just something that we will fully never be able to grasp. So today we're just going to dive into a little bit about the brain and things that we can do at home, in the office, to just basically improve how the brain functions, as well as things to just improve the overall health of the nervous system. So we're going to start with just a little bit of anatomy. So as the brain starts to develop, it actually develops starting from the right to the left. And it does this in different stages. So the first 2 years of life approximately are the right side of the brain developing, and then it switches to the left for a couple years. And then we switch back to the right side of the brain for a couple more years, and then we switch back, constantly back and forth until the brain is fully formed at 26 years old. Okay. The brain also develops from front to back and from bottom up. So that frontal lobe that sits at the very front of the brain, that's actually the last part of the brain to develop. So that's when a lot of our good decision-making, all of those things really come into play around middle to late 20s. So when we're talking about the brain in regards to development, as I mentioned, the first 2 years of life, we start on the right side and then we move over to the left. And the crazy thing about the brain is not only does it develop and does it change based on our age, but it also changes based on what gender we are. In regards to the brain, the sex that we're assigned at birth matters. And that's because men tend to live more in that left side of the brain. And the left side of the brain, that is where movement is centered. That's where intenseness is centered. That's where that physicality is centered. So that's why men are designed to be leaders and to do more of like those blue collar, high intense jobs, because that's literally how their brain was designed. Females tend to be more in that right side of that brain, okay? That's where the emotions are. That's where a lot of the feelings are. That's where our security, that's where our thoughts are. So when we talk about the difference between males and females, a lot of times females tend to have more mental disorders if they're ever developed. And that's because we're stuck in that right side of the brain, and the left side of the brain can't trump over the right side to get us out of those bad habits. Okay, so again, brain developing from right to left. As the brain develops, the right side actually keeps the left side of the brain in check. So the right side of the brain helps develop our big picture things. So if we think of like a big painting and we're trying to paint the picture, that's what creates the big overarching thing. The left side of the brain then comes in and paints more of those fine details. So it might paint the birds on a canvas or individual little tiny blades of grass. The issue with that, however, is when we don't get the big picture, our left brain starts to escape a little bit. So with people who have anxiety, a lot of times what happened is they're missing the big picture. So the left brain then starts to develop all these tiny little ideas, and it starts to escape away from reality. Okay. Again, that's why females tend to have more anxiety diagnoses than men, because of that whole escaping from that right brain. We don't have the big picture, and we want to make sure that we're filling in all the blanks, taking care of that. And so we just get into a rabbit hole of going down dark holes and imagine things that aren't there. The immune system is initiated by the left brain. The right brain then looks over the left brain and says, okay, is the immune response what it needs to be, or does it need to be more, or does it need to be less? When that right brain isn't working properly and the left brain initiates an immune response and nothing keeps the left side of the brain in check, that's when we start to have autoimmune diseases start to develop, because the body just starts attacking each other because the right side isn't regulating what's happening to the left side. All of the things we talk about in regards to the brain is super important because the brain then determines how all of our other things in the body function, how all of the other things process. Kids, as I mentioned before, the right side of the brain develops until about the age of 2, then it switches over to development of the left side of the brain. Moms, if you have little ones, especially in that terrible 2s range, the reason why they start to get crazy and out of control, and you're wondering like, what crazy sugary thing did they eat today? It's actually sometimes not related to that at all. It's due to the fact that the body has started to switch over the development of the left brain before the right brain is ready to switch over that process. And we start to get into that left-sided dominance, more of those little details rather than our big picture type things. And then we have kids who are crazy, out of control, unconsolable, have lots of developmental and anger issues. And again, it's because they're stuck in that left brain before the right side of the brain was ready to tell the left side of the brain what to do. By the time kiddos reach the age of 6, the male brain is actually 1.5 to 2 years behind the female brain in regards to speech and speech development, as well as ability to really communicate well. So the biggest issue that we have is we put kids in school at the exact same age. When they start school and females are ahead 1.5 to 2 years from a brain age, and we're asking kids to do the exact same thing, both boys and girls, in regards to reading and learning, we start to see that boys tend to fall a little behind. If a little boy is asked to read a book out loud and he's staring at the words and he can't understand them and he can't read them, and then he fumbles his words. And you look at all of the other kids little girls who aren't struggling with those things, and the natural tendency of kids is, unfortunately, they start to laugh and they start to judge and they start to make fun of kids who are not at the same level they are. And then these little boys start to act out because they're being made fun of. And so then they get into that the left side of the brain mode where they want to be more aggressive. And that's when they lash out, and that's when they hit or fight back and they get in trouble at school. And a lot of teachers, when they start to see those types of behaviors, they want to diagnose these little boys with ADD, ADHD, aggression, bipolar, and it's nothing at all to do with those types of diagnoses that we need to consider. It's the fact that from a brain age, the brain is behind 1.5 to 2 years compared to girls. So we're comparing apples to oranges, and we're really putting our kids at a disadvantage when we do that because we're trying to put them on the same level, and they're not. Because again, from the way that God designed our bodies, male brains and female brains are so different, okay? A little bit ago, I talked about how females tend to be in that right side of the brain with the emotion, with the feelings. Men tend to be in more in that left side of the brain with the logic and the movement and the intensity. And, sometimes that can put strains on marriage. And some of the biggest things that they have found from a research perspective in regards to divorce rates and things like that is the brain has something to be said about it, because we have so many people who don't understand that there's a difference between the male brain and the female brain. And then we try and put it on the same level, and we're constantly in conflict and combat with each other. And it's just because we don't understand how the other one thinks and how the other one works. So one of the best things for couples to do in regards to brain standpoint is to understand that the females need to be able to talk. They need to be able to get those emotions out. They need to get those feelings out, okay? And then the guys, typically in regards to what they need movement, okay? So some of the best things that they can do from like a marriage perspective is go and walk 15 minutes after dinner every night. Let your wife talk about how her day was. Those are the things that she's feeling, concerns. And then guys sometimes just need to get out, listen, walk, move, use the movement. And it can benefit a marriage in drastic ways because we're helping both sides of the brain in regards to males and females. Males typically, they on average, in regards to words of affirmation, yeah, they love it, but they typically don't need as much words of affirmation as us females do. And again, it's because they're stuck in that left brain. They don't need the constant reassurance because they don't live in the whole emotions, feelings part of the brain. So with the time that we have left today, we're just going to talk about how we can make a difference. What are the things that we can do for both our kids, for our couples, for individuals to kind of just help feed the brain? The biggest thing in regards to kiddos is just being involved and be active with them. The easiest thing to do is try and teach them a new life skill. When kiddos are taught new life skills, what it actually does is it helps feed both sides of the brain, both the left side of the brain, which is the emotions, the feelings, because they're feeling the affirmation, because they're learning something, they're getting the attention, and they're getting some words of affirmation because they're doing things well. From the left side of the brain, it's movement, it's the logic, it's the concrete fact of this is what it is, and now I know how to do it. So when we do life skills with them, like even teaching 2 to 3-year-olds how to cook pancakes, like how easy is that to do on a Saturday morning with your little kiddos? Stand up at the counter with them, show them how to mix and how to pour ingredients, and just having them know those life skills prepares them so much for the future, because then they don't have as many anxious thoughts about not being able to succeed later in life. And they're taught things that they can do, and they feel accomplished when they're able to do those things. Anything that we can do to help feed that right part of the brain essentially is going to help the left part of the brain as well as the entire body function better. People who have anxiety, one of the best things that you can do is go learn a new skill. Again, it's because of that right side of the brain versus the left side of the brain. When that right side of the brain is lacking information, the left side makes things up. When we learn something new, and we're developing those skills from a ground-based level, it helps feed that right side of the brain so the left side of the brain doesn't have to make up things that it doesn't know. Again, great thing for people who have anxiety, who have depression, is just going out, spending time, moving, as well as learning new skills, and it can make the biggest difference on people's health. Finally, the last thing and the most important thing is movement. There was a research article that was posted that actually says the most complex movement that we will ever do as humans is walking. And the reason that is that cross-body pattern fires the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain because it's working in opposite planes. So a lot of times movements that we do with the right side feeds the left side of the brain, and movements that we do with the left side, feeds the right side of the brain. So when we're doing that cross-body movement, it's creating new neurons and new firing and improving those connections across the hemispheres of the brain, so the brain works better overall. So walking is one of those great things that we can do. When we start to see kiddos, especially little boys who are getting ADD diagnosis, ADHD diagnosis, more aggressive diagnosis, the best thing that you can do is go outside in the yard with them and throw balls at them. But when we throw balls with them and we're playing catch, we want to keep it out of this midline field. Okay. We want to work a lot in these fields as well, going from side to side. So throwing a ball and making your child move a little bit to catch the ball with one hand to the side or down low. When we work in that different plane, it actually stimulates the brain better than if we were to work in an individual plane, okay? So less this way planar and more multi-directional. Again, when we work movements over here, it's feeding the left side of the brain. When we're working movements over here, we're feeding the right side of the brain. So anything that we can do in regards to side-to-side motions can help those kids just develop a better, healthier brain overall. Another great thing for kiddos, especially when they're in those younger years, is working on balance exercises, okay? So playing hopscotch, hopping on one foot, creating like a balance beam with duct tape and having them walk heel to toe across the beam per se. And again, the reason that is because it's firing up the bottom part of that brain, allowing it to develop better. Because when we don't have great balance, the rest of the brain can't work succinctly overall. Newborns. Babies, one of the biggest ways that babies get that good curvature in that spine is because of a good, healthy brain. So one of the things that we can do movement-wise with babies is while we're rocking your babies, moms, dads, whoever's holding the baby, move from side to side, sway your hips. Again, that introduces different parts of the brain into motion and into play. So overall, babies' brains just develop so much better. Again, and one of the last tips that I can always suggest that will help brain overall is getting chiropractic care regularly. And again, that reason that is because anytime we can remove interference from the nervous system, better activate the brain, it's going to function better. It's going to build new neuroplastic pathways over the hemispheres, so the brain just works overall so much better. So now that you're all considered brain experts, since you know a little bit more about the brain, I hope that you use some of these tips going into the fall with getting outside and just enjoying the little bit of sunshine and nice weather we have left. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.